Hi, everyone. Today, our speaker is Dr. Megan Mize. She is working here at ODU in the Center for High Impact Practices, and she's the Director of Eportfolio and Digital Initiatives. And her research interests are ePortfolio composition, extended reality, and GIFs as cultural and rhetorical artifacts. So I'm going to hand it off to her.
Thank you. All right, so can I just set this one down since I have that? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So thank you for the introduction. So my name is Megan Mize. I am the Director for ePortfolios and Digital Initiatives here at ODU. The Center for High Impact Practices recently changed its name to the Office of Academic Success Initiatives and Support, which is actually ASIS, but we didn't want people playing Wonderwall every time we walked in, so we go by ASIS. And I also teach in our English department. So when I talk to folks about media, I'm really coming from a background of English studies, rhetoric and composition, and digital humanities. And even though I'm the director for portfolio work, I'm always keeping an eye on what is emerging media doing and how is that impacting how we learn, how we communicate, and in this case, really looking at how immersion, simulation, this really rapidly developing technology is going to change the way we think about entrepreneurship in particular. So I called today Immersive Brands, Extended Reality, and Entrepreneurship. And when we talk about extended reality, this is a pretty contested term because, again, we're talking about technology that is new, that is changing today, this week. You maybe have heard of Facebook and the metaverse announcement in the last few weeks. The metaverse is actually this digital overlay that they think will soon just be a part of our everyday world. You and me will be walking around seeing digital content in real time, not looking at our phones, not looking at our computers. And the big companies like Facebook, Apple, and Google are really pushing to make that happen. And so when we talk about extended reality, really this is an umbrella term to talk about the gamut of technology from augmented reality to virtual reality and everything that sits in between that. And the next one that you'll probably really hear about is mixed reality. And so it's just this idea that the real world will start to be more impacted by a virtual world that we're going to be living within. So if you've seen Ready Player One, you've seen a dystopian version of the metaverse. And when I talk about the gamut, there's a whole range of extended reality. The ones that people most commonly know are augmented reality and virtual reality. And so augmented reality is where you have a virtual overlay on the real world. So have any of you played Pokemon Go or seen friends playing Pokemon Go? That's augmented reality because you're looking at real content. The real world has a trigger and the digital world responds to it and maps over it. If you have a backup cam in your car that puts lines on the road for you, that is augmented reality, this virtual overlay on real content. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have virtual reality, which is more immersive and will be increasingly immersive. So you can see over here, I've brought the Oculus Quest 2, the Google Cardboards. And this is the idea that you can put on hardware and move into entirely virtual worlds. You will eventually have avatars of yourself that may not look anything like you, move through spaces that you could not move through in the past. And we're getting to the point now where they're building out things that are called haptic suits. So you might wear gloves and body suits where you could feel the experience. Some of the VR rigs are so intense now that people have smell and wind and all of that. And they're thinking that in the very near future, that will just be a part of our home, is that you will have a VR space. So it's pretty big. And I want to go back a slide so you can see this animation one more time. Here, this is called an air card, and it's a business card with augmented overlay. And I'll go back one more time so you can see it play again. And all it is a paper business card that with your phone, you could hold it over the business card and you see his name pop out, his LinkedIn, any websites he's built. You can message him, call him, Zoom him, email him, all on your phone just because you scanned his business card. So think about QR codes, but made more intense, more user-friendly, more humane. right? And so that company is building out a tool right now that in the next month, you or I, not being coders, not being developers necessarily, could go on their website and build out our own augmented card, right? So this is coming right now. Like, it's already here and it's already happening. And when we think about entrepreneurship, why would we think about using this new mode of technology? And there was a TED Talk recently where they said, we've been living in the age of information, but we're moving into the experience age, where technology is less about giving you information in a one-way flow, but now engaging your senses and having the media impact empathy, physical experience, et cetera. And so when we're thinking about how we either market a product to people, or products we might design, or services we might design for the future, XR will probably be a pretty big part of that. And so, you know, the things that it can do, for instance, it can expand the range of interactions that your consumer or participants have. So right here, for instance, you see a company that sells augmented t-shirts to children who are learning about anatomy. And so they can put the t-shirt on and scan each other's anatomy and then dive deep into like the blood cells and the arteries in a way you couldn't do with a print book, right? And so these students get these really hands-on interactions with just a shirt. Or we see the pandemic had a massive impact on this field, in that once we all had to isolate, we had to think, how do we interact with one another and still have meaningful interactions? And the XR industry really stepped in and started thinking about, well, how do we get, for instance, shoppers to feel confident in purchasing something that's several $100s that they can't go into the store and see it, right? Or maybe we produce a one-of-a-kind thing in Italy, but I want to sell to Americans, right? How do I convince them to do that? So it reduces that space. And then finally, we're coming from this culture where we are information rich, visually literate by and large. We see so much media. We're saturated in media. There's a ton of noise. So how do we get above the noise that people see all the time? So if you think about how annoying pop-up ads are on websites, now they're like, well, what if we made users want to interact with our ads versus seeing them as an annoyance? So those are just a few arguments for why people are moving towards XR. And there's a couple of really great case studies out there for XR use. So the fastest growing industry is training people, right? The military just spent a ton of money on training exercises with the Microsoft HoloLens, which again is VR, where soldiers will go into VR. And, you know, if they're a tanker, they're going to learn how to work on a tank. And if they're a pilot, they would go and do simulation. But we see this too with things like mechanics or people learning to put computers together. They can go into VR and learn those kinds of things, or augmented reality. For instance, there's a company that does augmented reality for mechanics, where they would see the car in their local context, but the training company is somewhere else, and they would just draw on the screen, you need to fix the problem here, and they would see it and go work on the car there. So we're also seeing a growing industry in terms of tourism. We have a ton of VR tours. If you and I can't afford going to the Louvre, which I don't know about you, but I cannot, I can pop into VR right this second and go tour the Louvre or Versailles or go to Rome and see these places. Google Arts and Culture in particular has been building that out. And I like to just point out it's also an accessibility issue, because not just in terms of money and class, but in physicalities, there are things that people cannot go see that they could see in VR. And of course, we're seeing things like the gaming industry has clued in that XR is really going to be the next big thing. This past Halloween, there was a Resident Evil released on VR, and it just blew the gaming industry out of the water. It crashed the system because people wanted to be scared and really be chased by zombies. It is on my Oculus. I have not played it, and I will not play it in front of you because I'm sure I will scream. And then, like I said before, we're seeing the XR interact with print culture, right? The business card is a great example of XR amplifying existing material, but we're also seeing textbooks that have augmented reality. We're seeing posters and murals where if you go out into your public spaces and scan it with your phone, the mural comes to life, or you hear the artist speaking about their work, or you hear, like there's a really cool one up in DC where if you go to historic sites and scan it, you'll see archival pictures overlaid on top of the site in real time. So here's what the suffragettes looked like. Here's what this, this march looked like. And here's what it sounded like. And then, of course, museums are doing the same thing. We're seeing tons of folks engaging with that. If you go through the Chicago O'Hare Airport, there is an XR exhibit where if you stand in front of it, scan your body and turn you into a skeleton, and you can sit there and dance around. And they did a research project on that, and complaints dropped in that terminal by like 35%. And they could track how long people were playing in front of that XR experience. And, while I won't read these stats to you, I just want you to see that there's a wide breadth of opportunity for folks in entrepreneurship in any particular vector to engage with XR. So at the top, it says real estate. If you have been in the market anytime recently, or even if you're just one of those folks who likes to get on Zillow and daydream, you will see a 360 walkthrough of the vast majority of spaces. Again, those count as XR because it's putting you in the space. It's letting you see it in 3D. The military is a huge spender. Marketing and advertising, the auto industry, Cadillac just released a VR showroom where you can go and look at their cars, and if you have the right headset, you can drive one. I'm not that rich as to purchase a car. I've not actually driven, but apparently folks have. And then I wanted to point out education is one of the fastest growing, and at the bottom, unsurprisingly, healthcare is really leading that industry. And we're seeing a lot of things like telemedicine, where maybe you're wearing the haptic suit and they're reading your vitals somewhere else. So for instance, ODU has that kind of work with the Appalachia area where there's not a lot of medical professionals. So all you should take away from this is there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of growing interest in several different places. And one of the things that I think is really important when we're thinking about entrepreneurship is how do we make ourselves stand out, and how do we make people remember us? And XR engages empathy and emotion. People emotionally respond to these experiences. And so that tends to lead to higher retention rates and conversion rates. If I go to your site and I experience something that I associate with pleasure, I am likely to purchase or continue engaging with your product or services. And I'm going to show you a few different examples throughout this so that you're not just hearing me yak on about this amorphous idea of XR. But this is an airline out of Asia, and they did a 360 video campaign, which I'll pull up in a second. But when they did that, just to look at their quick stats, they saw, in terms of unaided awareness, not them pushing content out. This was being circulated by consumers. They did it, they shared it with their families, they shared it on social media. That number increased by 29%. Their brand favorability went up by 29%. And then their preferences went up by 12%. And it outperformed any other campaign they'd ever had as a business. And so just to show you what that looks like, thanks for the ads, YouTube. Dismiss. And this is pretty simple. And I'm going to not worry about the music, but there is music gently playing. And it's just a video. So you can see they have a noodle bar. This is what happens when you're waiting for this plane. So you can turn all around. You can see what their flight looks like, and go through the actual build out of the plane. Earlier, they have how to get tickets. And, this is pretty simple. In fact, ODU has the technology for someone to build out a 360 video here. They have the cams that do the 360 shots. So this is XR, right? And this is something that has a big impact. So that's kind of a low level XR. I should probably close it so that you guys don't continue an airplane ad for all time. But you can see that had a big impact for them. And in a recent Forbes report where they analyzed specifically augmented reality, because augmented reality is the one that is easiest because we are attached to these. And thus, augmented reality can be read by our phones, right? It doesn't rely on this external hardware just yet. And so they ask consumers their feelings about augmented reality advertising or augmented reality services. And I think these numbers really speak for themselves. And this came out last year. So this was during the pandemic, and this trend will probably keep going up. But the idea that 71% of your consumers are more likely to shop your content if you have some sort of XR interaction is not a number you should look away from. The fact that 61 of them would just think more favorably of your entire business if you had XR is really compelling. And the thing I wanted to point out here is 40% said if they could customize your product in XR, they would be more likely to engage with that. And then conversion rates are those rates where I go look at your product, do I actually buy it? And for that to bump 40% is also just phenomenal. So that's my pitch to you as to why you should not look away from XR technology. That's pretty good coming from consumers. And up to now, I've been talking about XR as advertising, right? But that's not all there is to entrepreneurship. We see people now creating XR services and products specifically, right? So I don't just mean like really fancy companies who are out there building out really expensive tech. I mean something as simple as this, right? This is, there are several of these companies called XR fashion companies, and I just pulled an example called DressX. And the principle here is that using augmented reality, I can go to DressX, pick any outfit that's purely digital, take a picture of myself and see, do I like how this looks on me? So it'll overlay the fashion on top of me. And then I pay them for that fashion, and I send them the photo that I want that fashion to show up on me. So she has picked this outfit, sent them this photo, and they've overlaid that digital content on top of her, and it goes out on her page. Other uses of AR in this way is we're seeing this kind of green fashion movement. So you might just be wearing what looks like a regular outfit, but once I scan you with my phone, it's moving, it's undulating, you have wings, you know, whatnot. And I think you can get the implications for why people are moving towards AR glasses. And once that's a reality, which will probably be within the next 2 to 5 years, we may stop wearing clothes like this and wear clothes that have triggers that show up in the digital world, in the metaverse. So this is XR as a product. And then I mentioned another one earlier, and we actually have a company here in Norfolk, Ario, who does XR technology for training. And so what they do is when there are problems with systems and the workers maybe don't know how to fix it, this technology allows people to see in real time what their workers are struggling with, use augmented reality to show them where they need to interact with the machine or whatnot, and trains them that much faster. So all that to say is that Norfolk's already in the XR game. We're already there. There are already local companies playing with this and doing quite well. But I'm tired of talking. I want to play with you. Let's play with one called Wanna Kick. Unsurprisingly, the sneaker industry was one of the first industries to really think about advertising in XR. So if you are willing, and if you have not done so yet, go on your app store. This is available on both iOS and Android, and simply put in Wanna Kicks. And I'm going to do it with you just because I want to make sure I've got everything on here right. But it's pretty self-explanatory once it's uploaded. Don't take this picture where it looks like I'm just chilling on my phone during a presentation. It's like, wow, she's really not paying attention. Yeah, you're just running through. And once you do have the app, you'll see a gallery of just, shoes. You can pick any shoe you want. Yeah, be careful. They're like $600 shoes. But then you'll see at the bottom, once you pick a shoe, hit the pink button that says try on, and then, point it at your foot, and you will be able to see it shaped to your particular foot, leg, height, everything like that. And you may have to give it permission to read your camera. So we could always talk about ethics, data privacy in XR, but that's a different presentation. Yeah, I found a cute pair yesterday. It was $900. And it's like, I have great taste, and I will not be buying these. So. Pretty easy though, right? I think you can see why they got a particular boost during the pandemic. Like they were kind of a startup that were helping other companies like Nike, and then they realized they could just do this on their own. You didn't need Nike. Although Nike does have its own AR experience. And you can keep playing with your fresh kicks if you'd like, but I would like to show you another way that companies are using AR. And I recognize the two that I have up here are big companies. So, but it's still just showing you trends. So if you have an Apple phone, an iPhone, you can go to IKEA Place. And if you have an Android, I would encourage you to go to Amazon Shopping. And for you guys on Androids, I've picked out a very specific one because Amazon's is a little harder to engage with. But the idea in these two apps, the instructions are on the board, is that you can test IKEA furniture in your house. If you're like me and you spent last year looking at your house thinking, man, this place needs an upgrade, and I need to throw everything else out. You can go find a couch on IKEA, point your camera at the place you want to see that couch, and try it out. See how big it is, see if the color matches, rotate it around, see if you need to move your cat bed to make it fit. And I'll let you keep playing with that while I kind of talk to you. So, well, this is great, right? XR is, like I said, rapidly evolving. And what's interesting about it right now is we're really at that kind of tipping point. It's not yet here where everyone can build XR, but it's close. Again, it's within the next 5 years, right? So for instance, in our daily work, we help people build websites. And about a decade ago, if I told you you could build a website in an hour, you probably would have laughed at me, and you would have had to know code. You would not be able to do that from scratch. But now people can crank one out using Adobe Spark, Wix, Weebly, WordPress, Squarespace, you name it. XR is the same. We're getting really close to the moment where lay people can build really compelling XR activities. And it's not to say there aren't some contenders out there. So for instance, Blipper, which you can see is Blip AR, you can go on there and build out augmented reality experiences using triggers. So you would have pictures that you would then overlay content on top of. And you can do things that are really low level, like adding audio, video, website links, things like that nature. Or you can get a little more aggressive and do 3D objects and scenes of that nature. But I mentioned earlier that we're seeing the big companies really go all in, right? Apple and Facebook in particular are committing pretty much the majority of their workforce to XR. So if you have one of the newest iPhones, you'll have things like LiDAR technology in your phone. And so the AR kit is making a big splash in the reality kit where people are starting to build out augmented reality. If you played with Snapchat, you're playing with AR, and they've shifted over to being called Snap Lens, and they're actually the ones who are building out the most promising AR glasses. And right now they're in beta where they're having artists build out AR experiences for that. But next year, you and I will be able to buy it. And they're building the technology for us to be the ones building out the AR overlay. So it is coming. If you're really good, you can go build in Adobe. They have a ton of XR material. They just did Adobe Max where they were teaching people how to build VR and AR using their products. And the other one that is common, it still requires you to have some specialist knowledge, but there's a lot of training, is Unity, which is previously a gaming technology, but obviously gaming and XR are really going to intersect pretty closely in the future. So all that to say is you can get started. You can use Blipper today. And then there's a scale that goes up. And in the near future, it will be even easier. And I just wanted to share this because I can sit here and tell you it's great. You should do it. But I want to give you just a few thoughts on if you were to be working, say, with a company who built XR for you or whatnot, things to keep in mind. We just encountered some of these problems using the app. So one, if you use XR for, say, marketing, you want to make sure that it's not disruptive to the user experience. There's got to be a reason they're interacting with your content, right? So, there was a great example, and I forget the wine name. I think it's 19 True Crimes. It's a wine company, but when you scan the wine label, the labels come to life, right? And so I am already looking at your wine bottle, and now you've added a layer of interest to it. You have not disrupted my experience. The other thing that we really have to keep in mind is, in particular, viewability. Who can see it? How can they see it? And how long is it on my screen? I will go back to the idea of how annoying pop-up ads are, and then they just stay on my screen. If I'm looking at my phone, I don't want to look at your experience for like 20 minutes. Right? I should be able to get in and out. And the one we just encountered is thinking about cross devices, and that's the biggest problem for XR right now. For instance, Android has not invested in XR, but Apple has. And so there are a lot of apps that only work on Apple and not Android. I imagine that will change pretty soon, but you do want to think about that. And I recognize I'm a nerd and I'm an English scholar, so I always do a little right pair share. So I've been talking to you, but I would like you to just do a quick little exercise, and you can do it on your phone or you can do it on a piece of paper, old school. But I would like for you to think about if you have any entrepreneurial ideas, products, services, businesses in mind, or even if they're not yours, you can think about other people's. How might you add an element with XR that might make it more meaningful or impactful to your consumer, the audience you're reaching out for? And what other possibilities might you imagine for it? So I want to give you like 3 minutes, and I hope you will indulge me and just spend a minute or two thinking about this or writing. But how could you use XR to amplify your content? So does anyone have any initial thoughts on how you might use, say, augmented reality or a virtual reality experience that you would like to just dream? Yeah.
I did
nice.
And first 2 to 3 weeks of that was spent just trying to learn the part that we make. It's a complicated part.
Yep.
A lot of different processes. And if you could have extendable and exposable to that, you could just go and tap on a surface and see what process is used on the surface. I definitely would have had to have spent 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and you're right on trend. There's, I saw an example out of Japan where they were learning how to repair like photocopiers or something, and they did exactly that, where they would hold basically an iPad and it would come apart, and then they were able to go into the machine without breaking it down and be like, this is what you're looking for here. So yeah, wonderful example. What else? I saw, Lisa, did you have a hand up? Is that you? No? Yeah, I thought I saw a hand over in the center. My peripherals. Yeah.
Where set up where you point your phone to a building and
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think it might be Georgia State that had a thing that they worked with students during their week of welcome. And they had students who had been there for a while created like audio or even video, and then set this up around campus so that new students, when they came up, would scan it and be like, hi, welcome to the engineering building, and here you'll find the whatever, it's open these hours if you need help, etc. And the response was phenomenal because people felt seen. They felt like they were being talked to by real humans. And it was a movement where it was really informed by students. Like, this is what I wish I'd known when I first came to this campus. I've also seen a few, I'm sorry, I touched my mic. So I've seen a few too, where it's really interesting, where people have done things like interviewing like local older communities, and then taking those narratives and then making augmented reality content on historically important spaces. You know, so I saw that for a Black Lives Matter civil rights movement, and I saw that for like a queer histories similar. And so people are really using voice space in meaningful ways. So I think that would be, I think ODU would benefit from that. Or even if we have that rock out there that's constantly being painted, like if we had augmentation for that every time it's updated, that would be amazing. Really good ways to personalize the space that we move through. And thinking about the fact that our distance students don't see this space, I will tell you, we do have virtual reality versions of several buildings on campus that if students had access to the headsets, distance students would be able to see what those spaces look like. And VMask here at ODU is working on a metaverse version of some of the labs. So distance workers would be able to put on a headset and work alongside their colleagues in the lab and see each other through that way. So that's definitely coming for us. Other possibilities, thinking about products or materials in your lives? You should augment some theater posters. Just thinking about the Virginia Stage Company, that'd be great.
There's a lot that's being explored in the theater/education.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mentioned to him earlier, so I also teach Shakespeare, right? Just a weird career academic right here. And so I had students in an asynchronous course. For years, I've sat here and lectured on the importance of why the Globe Theater mattered and how that impacted the way theater was designed at that time. But there is a 3D model available on both iOS and Android. And so I had my students who I never met use this augmentation, and suddenly they understood what a thrust stage was. They understood how class informed space, et cetera, et cetera. And the responses were amazing because I can't send them to London, but they were able to move it around, move in and out of the space that I just previously talked about in a way that must have bored them to tears, I guess. So apologize. So I could show you a few other apps if you just want to play with some augmentation. I also have brought an Oculus Quest if somebody would like to go into real VR. It doesn't have anything to do with entrepreneurship, but it has lots to do with games. And I also brought some Google Cardboard so I could put some of you into 360 video if you would just like to see how YouTube has come at mobile VR. So I recognize I talked a lot about AR, but that's because I think for entrepreneurship, that's really where you need to put your money and your time. And I am sure that, you know, Sharon can say more about it, but I'm sure you could find some small business grants and get some money to build out some marketing for a product. So, you know, if you had, I know one of my colleagues has like a purse line, and, you know, you could have people try on their purses with their outfits and things of that nature. So I hope this conversation has inspired you to think about how this new media might change the way you both consume content and how you might reach out and appeal to others. And if you are interested, I'm just going to set up the technology up here and invite you to play with some VR here shortly. Yes. Oh, yeah. This is phenomenal. I mean, that should make your eyebrows go straight into your hairline. You know, it's interesting because earlier, Michael, right? Is that right? mentioned that one of my research interests, again, I'm a weird duck, is gifts. And I'm actually writing a book on gifts. And we did a whole chapter on how businesses are using gift technology to get to consumers because it can repeat ad nauseum and it's silent, so it does not interrupt your day, and it can show up on your phone. And so they saw big numbers. And so industry paid attention to that. These numbers are way better than what we saw with the gifts. So it's really quite important when a consumer tells you that they might even just like your whole business better, let alone a product better, if you have that technology. And there's something to be said about novelty and fun. And for some reason in scholarship, we love to pretend like that doesn't matter, but humans like to play. And so I may not like your wine, but you better believe I'm going to buy that bottle, right? And if you go up to Washington, D.C., there is a purely digital museum called the Art Tech House. And they are the first, I feel bad I'm talking about drinking on here. Drink responsibly, everybody. But they have a bar with the first augmented reality drinks. And it's not the drink that's augmented, it's the coaster. And so when you put the coaster under the drink, and then scan it with your phone, it interacts with your drink and does things that relate to the theme of that presentation. So for instance, I went up during the Cherry Blossom Festival, and when I scanned my phone, there was a little man on the cherry blossom rowing through my drink, right? And people just go nuts for it. These drinks are way overpriced, but we're paying for the coaster. And so I really want you to think about how can you be playful, how can you be imaginative, and how can you really take this technology, invite humans to think about content in ways that is innovative, different. Like it really opens up what we can do. So, and I was chatting right before this. I think the next thing you're going to see the major breakthrough, what they're really thinking the kicker point will be, is when people understand how much XR can do for fitness. And that is the fastest growing XR industry. I gave the anecdotal story about my father, who is a retired fighter pilot who maybe occasionally goes for a walk. But pre-pandemic, I bought him an Oculus Quest, and he fights demons every night for hours. And it has lowered his blood pressure to the point that the doctor's like, I don't know what exercise you're doing, but you need to keep it up. And so that's really where they're seeing this massive shift towards fitness and play and simulation. So if you're somebody who's looking for a business model, think about how you can hook into wellness and physicality and XR, and you will probably make a ton of cash. So yeah, any other questions or thoughts or examples you've seen that I haven't mentioned maybe? Yeah. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yep, absolutely. It's also going to be a safety measure because in many ways there's things, again, so my eldest nephew, he is a tanker in the Army and he is 20. So that should terrify you that he is out there with $1 million equipment. But when he heard I started doing this research, he came back 2 weeks later and he was like, Megan, they put me in a HoloLens and had me simulate when my tanker breaks down and I had to repair treads, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, it's also cost efficient because they don't want to break down a tank to teach you how to fix a broken tank, right? So it's phenomenal. It's happening very quickly. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it also leads to deepened retention of memory, which is one reason it's helpful for like marketing, right? But the other thing when we talk about it from the learning angle, and I could go on about the importance of failure in learning, but when you're in VR and you fail, the system instantly tells you why you failed. And so you have an immediate feedback loop. And they've shown that in terms of cost and time, they can speed up typical learning processes by as much as 2 to 3 weeks. And so it's like that is phenomenal for a workforce when you're trying to deploy them very quickly, or in our cases right now where we have a labor shortage, how do we get people up to speed rapidly in very personalized, customized ways? Because humans learn through relationships and customized learning. So there's a lot that will come out. And one of my favorite case studies that I saw came from a veterinary clinic where they train people on horse care. And they did a whole VR thing. And they were like, what's really less expensive is a VR horse. So they went from having a stable of 20 horses to 2 horses because then they could have people practice on the VR horse over and over and over again and then go to the real horse. And so just really quite exciting to see that this is evolving and really moving out in pretty much every aspect of our life. So it was interesting because, again, I had a colleague a few weeks ago who was like, oh, this is some George Jetson stuff, which first of all, I was like, George Jetson, okay. But I was like, no, it's happening right now. Like we're already encountering it to the point that we are maybe not even aware that that is coming our way. So yeah. Other examples you might have seen or encountered or can think of? I'll give you one that I thought was really funny that I heard. So a museum up in Canada was running a campaign to raise money for like a forest that was being deforested. And so they had this immersive experience in the museum where you went into the pod, you had your headset, the whole haptic suit and everything, and you were a tree from like seedling to full-grown tree, and you had to like put your arms up and you had to move in the wind and face the heat. Like they had heat, smell, and everything, except at the end you were chopped down before you reached your full potential. And my colleague who was researching this one, Amanda LaCastro, who spoke to us last year, she said her favorite moment was this kind of lumberjack-looking guy came out just weeping buckets because he didn't get to get his full branches out, and they crushed their fundraising in a matter of a week or two. So it just engaged the human empathy and made people see it from a different angle, away from profit and towards impact, right? And so, when I think about, we can do that on big levels, but we can do it on really small interactions. And you guys want to try one more app, just while I'm thinking about it? I tried to pick business-facing apps today, so that's why they're not on here. But if you want to, if you look up AR Jenga, and it may only work on iOS, we'll see. And in fact, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to switch presentations and pull up well, no, I can't. Not on this one. Sorry. Just try AR Jenga. Like the tower game, Jenga. Jenga. And if I have a Southern accent, I apologize. Let's see if that one comes up. And if it doesn't, we'll do just a line. Oh, yeah, you got the HTC, yes. That's cool, man. So it's called Balanced Tower AR. Sorry, there you go. Balanced Tower AR. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's on there. That's the one I will either have, if anyone wants to try the Oculus here, I wanted to give us time at the end for people to play. I will either put you in First Steps or Beat Saber. And yeah. Yeah, we got Skrillex on there now too. Have you done Synth Riders? That one's brilliant. It's really interesting. The music industry is really playing with that. We could talk about how the music industry, games and XR in particular, are coming together. But that's how they're teaching small kids how to like drum or play guitar in XR. Find it, Balanced Tower AR. Yeah, you can play a game of Jenga. You just point it in a space, try to remove the blocks. A colleague of mine who's a game studies scholar had his students write about what do we gain and what do we lose when analog games move into XR spaces versus doing Jenga at O'Connor's, right? What sound, smells, what's the difference? I find I'm really impatient with the Jenga augmented. There's another one. If you are a fan of getting tattoos, called Ink Hunter, that you can get on your phone right now. It's free. And tattoo artists put their drawings on Ink Hunter, and then you can point it at your skin and size it and place it and see if you like it. So it's called Ink Hunter. Yes, yeah, there are, she's exactly right. There are augmented tattoos out there where people can do that. And I haven't really talked to you in depth just because it wasn't the point of this particular presentation about the different styles of AR. But we're seeing, for instance, projection mapping is growing. So if you've ever seen like the shots of the Disney castle with all kinds of wild lights and things like that, that is AR projection mapping. If you go to Vegas at the Neon Museum, there is a presentation called Brilliant, where they take all the old neon signs that they can't repair, and with, I think they have 200 projectors, they make them come to life. Like it looks like they're actually working because they have AR projection mapping on top of them. So, you know, it's really just kind of becoming parts of elements of our lives that, you know, just like our phone will be ubiquitous and we won't even notice it at some point. So, but again, I mentioned Snap Lens really briefly, but if you do Zoom and you change your background, you're using AR. If you use any of the filters over your face, you're using AR. You know, so if you turn yourself into a puppy with the tongue sticking out, that is augmented reality, right? So, and Snap Lens is going really deep into LiDAR technology. So soon it won't just be mapping your face, it'll be mapping your whole space, and you can set your virtual background to really be not just a flat Zoom background. And so we're seeing people sell those too, like really cool 3D backgrounds that people can use on Zoom and things of that nature. So all kinds of opportunities. You just got to have the imagination, and right now the hookup to a company can help you build that. But it's, you know, it's soon going to slide into consumer use, commercial use. Is anyone willing to try a little VR? You don't have to do it in front of everyone. I just figured people would get up and walk around later. Any other questions, thoughts, feelings, concerns, hopes, or dreams for ODU and XR? Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. If you want, I'm going to pull this open.